And our third speaker is Cecily Heiner from Southern Utah University, who is going to be talking about leveraging existing budgets and resources.
Okay, I've got handouts. This is going to be somewhat interactive. And I promise once I distribute paper, I will try to anchor myself close to a mic. Take one, pass along. Should be pretty. Get out a writing utensil, that might help. We're going to be somewhat... my goal is to make this as useful as possible for you, all things considered. Has everybody got at least a handout? Has anybody not gotten a handout? Okay, so the second question is, have you ever thought, I could teach so much more effectively if only I had ... So the first question is, what might come after that ... for you? And those are the things I want you to list in your wish list column. So I'm going to give you about a minute to frantically think of things that you might like to have for your classroom. And then I'm going to give you some more ideas for things that you might like. We might whip around and talk about what things people would want for the classroom. Feel free to collaborate with your neighbors. This is not necessarily a silent individual activity. Some people want more students, some people want less students, some people want more classes. You don't have to agree. You're just making a list. Okay, so I'm going to start reading my list. Feel free to jot jots as I talk. And I've got business cards at the end if you want to email me. I'm more than happy to send you the hard copy version that has my entire list in it if you don't write as fast as I talk. So some of the things on my list are tablets, laptops, desktops, software, web server space, cloud storage, robot kits, electronic tools. There's things like peripherals like headphones, printers, headsets, scanners, cameras, video cameras, jump drives. There's things like furniture, things like chairs, whiteboards, bulletin boards, paint, yarn, fabric, cardboard. There's things like school supplies, pencils, pens, whiteboard markers, notebooks, binders, maybe prizes, treats, candy, party supplies, videos, gift cards, school supplies, dollar store gifts. Does anybody have anything that I did not mention that they would like to share with the rest of the group? Okay, one here.
Less students? No. Usually in computer classes, what they do is they'll have 2 or 3 classes, regular classes, so you end up with about 50, or at least 48 is what happens in the school that I taught at. But so that's why less students is very important. Happy students, engaged students. So what you're talking about in the wish list is more not student-based, but more like supplies?
Yeah, more supplies is kind of where this particular mini session is going. I'm sorry if I was not clear. Okay. Okay, I like that list. That's another good list, but that's not what I'm prepared to talk about today. Okay, here.
I had money to attend conferences, and also it'd be nice to have some time off just to learn all the new software that we learn about.
Okay, we're going to talk about how do we keep up with professional development, because that's, I think, a major challenge for computing teachers, regardless of what level you teach at. Did you want?
Qualified assistance.
Qualified assistance. Okay, we're going to talk more about that one in a minute, too. Oh, textbooks is a good one. Sometimes people want textbooks. We'll talk a little bit about that, too. Remind me if I don't at the end. Other things you might want would be time. So like a guest speaker or a field trip opportunity, somebody to make copies, somebody to test student software, a customer for a student software project, somebody to count box tops, somebody to submit box tops, somebody to advise a robotics team or after-school activity, somebody to put together a film or video on your class, somebody to help display student work. As you build your wish list, I encourage you to think hard and long about things that are both very non-time consuming and things that are more time consuming, things that are cheap and things that are expensive. We all know lots of people, and most people, given the opportunity to help with computing education, they want to help. They just don't know how to help. So building a wish list for your computing classroom is kind of like building a wedding registry. You want to have lots of items at lots of different price points so that everybody that wants to help can. Because there are a lot of people out there that really do want to help you have a more successful classroom. When you build your list, I would encourage you to think about things like, does it need to be new? Does it need to work? I mean, if you're just tearing a computer apart to see what the CPU looks like and what the RAM looks like, that maybe doesn't need to work. You can go buy that at the thrift shop. If you need a digital camera for student presentations, that doesn't necessarily need to be new, it just needs to be functional, right? What's the cheapest way to get this item? You know, there are very expensive, beautiful, glossy page school supply manuals, but I have found that they are often way overpriced for the things that they sell. The best way to get school supplies is usually to go to Walmart about July or August when things are super cheap and buy everything that you need for the whole year and then decide you're not going to go back until the following July or August. A lot of electronics, like headsets for your classroom, you can get cheaper through the dollar store if you just need earbuds. You can get things off of eBay. A lot of times if you need something, a bigger, more expensive piece of equipment, you might look at University Surplus for your local university. Look at whatever the local Salvation store is called where you live. It might be Goodwill, it might be Deseret Industries, it might be Salvation Army. I'm sure there are other varieties of these things, but you know what I mean. There are plenty of places where people salvage stuff. If you can get more resources like that, then sometimes you're more able to acquire the things that you need or want. Also, a lot of times students have parents that work where there are computers, and at the end of their 3-year cycle, they want to surplus their machines, and sometimes you can get surplus machines brought into your school so you can actually have 1 machine per student if that's an issue in your classroom. Your students might already have headphones or cell phones or Android devices, so you might not need to go and buy a classroom set, depending on whether you just need it to have a small screen or if you need to have it all be on the same operating system. If you want to buy cell phones for your classroom, I think the cheapest option is the Nokia 520 or 521, and those are about $60 or $70 through the Microsoft Store website, and you don't have to have a cell phone contract for those phones. So those are no contract phones if you just want a Wi-Fi device. That's a relatively cheap way to get cell phones into your classroom. When it comes to software, so there's always a very expensive commercial alternative. So there's Photoshop and there's Microsoft products that are very expensive, but there's also a lot of free and open source software out there. And if you can learn to use that, you can often get the features that you need, especially in the schools where the kids are just learning the most basic features, are often implemented in free and open source products. So GIMP is an open source photo editing product that you can use in lieu of Photoshop. There's Google Docs and other tools of that nature. In terms of curriculum, there's a lot of curriculum online. I mean, computer science, by the time we get it in print and through the review process, it's usually practically outdated by the time it shows up in a book. So if you can learn to use online tutorials, whether it's the stuff through Touch Develop or the stuff through learn.code.org or the stuff through W3 Schools, there's lots of online curriculum. If you can learn to leverage and exploit those in your classrooms, then you will not have to buy textbooks and you'll be helping your students stay more current. Probably Touch Develop. That's a Microsoft one. It's fun. And if you don't know how to code and you're curious about coding, try the Touch Develop tutorials because it tells you exactly where to click and there's a cute little highlighter thing and it's fabulous and wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to give you another 30 to 40 seconds to think about who you might talk to get help with building your network to acquire these supplies. And then we'll kind of talk around and I'll talk a little bit more. Okay. The good news is if you're teaching secondary school, one advantage that you have over us college faculty is that you probably have a lot more students and student families. If you're typical, let's be super conservative and assume that you have 5 classes and that each class has 20 students. Realistically, probably many of you teach more than 5 classes, and probably most of those classes have more than 20 students. But even if you only have 5 classes and 20 students, how many students' families is that can help you grant things on your wish list? That's 100 people, right? And not everybody on that list is going to be able to contribute, but even if a few of them contribute a few things, that's going to add up fast. And if you have simple things on your list, like counting the box tops, I mean, there's a good chance that even if you're in a lower income school where people may not have money to donate, a lot of people eat food, and they can collect those box tops and come in and count them for you. And that's money that you can translate into classroom money, especially if you're teaching 7th, 8th grade. If you're teaching high school, box tops do not work in high school. But there are other things you can do at the high school level to help get resources in your classroom. Really good times to talk to parents about these kinds of things are back to school night. If you just put your list up on your door so that parents can see it, a lot of them will see it and respond to it. Or if you keep it on your desk or your table, wherever it is you meet with the parents, just kind of leave it there. A lot of them will just see it and make the connection. Or they might ask, is there anything I can do for you? And then you can show your list and say, well, actually I have these. If there's something from here you can do, that would be great. And a lot of times parents will try to help you if they know what to do. It's also really important to work with your administration to make sure your program is receiving the correct amount of funding from federal, state, and local CTE funding allocations. I know I was teaching at a charter school, and there was extra paperwork that had to be done in order for us to receive our CTE allocations. And we were not sending the right people to the district and state meetings to have that funding allocated, and so we were not receiving our share of the allocation. So it's really important to work with your administration and make sure that all of those channels are being fully utilized. A lot of times when people have impoverished computing programs, it's because they're not utilizing those existing resources. So I would encourage you to think really hard and make sure that all that is being done properly. And that's especially important because you want to use those regularly recurring CTE funds for the standard things that you need to make your classroom work. Your basic desktops, laptops, the things that you have to have for your students to learn. When you write grant proposals, it's really important to write a grant proposal that is going to make your program unique and special, right? Everybody wants, a classroom set of iPads. So wanting a classroom set of iPads alone is probably not going to make for a great grant proposal, unless they're trying to give it specifically to your school and you just have to convince them that you're better than the other teachers in the school. It's much better if you can create a compelling reason why you will be unique and special, that you have some unique special thing that combined with the resource that you want is going to make your program a better program. When you take your students on field trips to corporations and universities, and I think a lot of times there's a misconception that the only places we can take our computer students on field trips is places like Microsoft and Google. Well, I was teaching this class in Da Vinci, which is in Ogden, Utah. We didn't have any Microsoft or Google offices nearby. But only about 50%, maybe less, of computer science people actually work at companies like Amazon or Google or Microsoft. The other 50% work on hardware and software for all kinds of other companies. If you think of, Jelly Belly, they use robots to make their jelly beans. Somebody had to design that hardware, and somebody had to design the software that makes that work. If you think of the movie Avatar, they have these fancy headdress cameras that they wear. Somebody had to design that headdress camera, and somebody had to program it. That's all computer science. If you think of medical robotics, you could take your kids to the hospital and show them medical robotics. Somebody had to design that medical robot that does the surgery, and somebody had to program it, right? So I think it's important to help our kids have a broader perspective of what computing is about and how they can utilize it in their daily life, not just to sit in a cubicle, look at ones and zeros, and work for Microsoft. I actually think that Microsoft and Google are a terrible place to take your kids on a field trip because if you look at what the people are doing for working, they just appear to be staring at a screen. Most kids in high school don't have enough knowledge to appreciate the work that those people are doing in their workplace. So if you can take them somewhere else, I would argue that's perhaps even better. And when you go on field trips to places like that, a lot of those places have surplus desktops. And if you have a connection because your students' parents are already working there, if you have a chance to ask your field trip guide kind of on the side, what happens to your surplus computers? A lot of people just throw them in a dumpster because they don't know who or how to give them to school. But if you can work with your administrators and make, sometimes you need to patch that leaky pipeline to get the supplies from the workplace to your classroom, but it can be done. Also, when you're shopping and surfing the internet, sometimes there are opportunities for small grants. And when you go to professional meetings or work with your state and district leaders, they may know about special programs that they could help you target specific resources that you're looking for. When you do meet people that can help you, make sure you exchange contact information. And when somebody does help you, make sure you send them a thank you note. That extra act of acknowledgement and appreciation goes a long way in terms of making things happen. We have a couple more minutes. I want you to think about building a project team. So who are people that you can work with to make these projects happen, especially if you want things that are going to cost more than $2,500 and you're a high school teacher, you're probably going to need to partner with other people. So who might you partner with in order to make this happen? It could be anything from a U.S. First Robotics team to something else. You're going to need partners if you want anything that's more than about $2,500. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about that, and then I'll handle some Q&A for a couple of minutes, and then I think we're about out of time. I'm sorry my talk is not as fun as the one next door. Okay, in terms of building a project team, if you want to go after really big grants, it's important to partner. Realize that university professors need K-12 teacher partners for a lot of their projects. So try and find somebody who's motivated and successful in that space and located near you. Coming to conferences like this is a great way to meet people and partner up on projects. You can also partner with parents and students. Sometimes you can find a parent that's a great grant writer that can help you get things and do things. And the other thing is you often need a handful of dedicated students. If you can find 1 or 2 students that's really passionate about helping you and helping improve computing, those few students can go out and recruit more students for you. I always tell my good students that if they liked the class, that they should send their friends to take the class. And I tell my students that if they didn't like the class, they should send their enemies to take their class. And I have gotten great students both ways, so I'm all about that. But certainly there's lots of resources out there, there's lots of opportunities out there, it's just a matter of putting them together. I think I'm about out of time. I've got about 90 seconds for Q&A, and then I've got business cards for anybody who wants them, and then I think our session time is up. So are there questions? Okay, 1, 2.
What's the best method that you personally have found to bring in that extra income?
So our CTE money was not rolling when I was because I was at a charter school. So that was certainly the biggest chunk of change that we got going. I was at a 7 through 12 school, so we got the box tops going. I think we brought in somewhere between $500 and $1,000 just from box tops from 1 year. And I wasn't even super working on it that hard. I was just working on it some with very reluctant administrator support. As soon as my administration saw that first check, they immediately got another parent on that one ASAP. But it took me about a year of working the administration down to do that. I worked with a company called the Electro Regeneration Society, and they donated a bunch of printers to our school because we had issues with printers and not having them in my classroom. I never quite did get the laptop problem completely solved, but I found some of those that were collecting dust in a former teacher's classroom that I was able to commandeer and get set up, so that helped with that problem some. I mean, that's some of what I accomplished. There were other things, too. I did the wish list thing, and I had several items on that wish list that I had parents of some of my students donate, so that was great. Especially, like with a junior high set, that works a little bit better because the parents are used to buying presents for their elementary teachers, and sometimes that carries on into junior high. Tends to not happen so much when they're in high school. Okay, quick question here.
Do you know any good resources for finding specific grants locally at your state level?
So at this state level, I recommend working with the people at your state office of education. I know in Utah, those people are Rick Gaius-Ford and Carl Lyman. Carl Lyman is here. Rick Gaius-Ford, I know, kind of manages the grants. Also, your CTE directors probably go to some kind of state meetings where they talk a lot about resources and those kinds of things to make sure you're on good terms with them. You know, make sure you send them a chocolate bar or a thank you note when you do connect with these resources or they connect you. And then look online and find out about things too. If you have other questions, I've got business cards and I'll be sitting over here until the end of the break.